Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter,
business editor and columnist Greg Jefferson.
Recording this on Monday, March 8th. We are 6 weeks away from the beginning of early voting for San Antonio City Council and mayoral elections. And, there's been a lot of focus on the open seats, districts 3 and 5, and there are a lot of candidates there. But I've been paying a lot of attention, I think we all have, to District 2 on the east side, where you have 11 candidates challenging the incumbent, Jada Andrews Sullivan. It's unusual to have an incumbent facing that many challengers. And we, as our guest today, we have one of the challengers, but not just one of the challengers, someone who's, I think, really stood out already in the process. Jalen McKee-Rodriguez is 26 years old, a teacher at Madison High School. In the first 6 weeks of his campaign, raised more than $17,000. I think that was by far the most in District 2. And has been getting a lot of attention and a lot of progressive support. Just over the weekend, got the endorsement of the Stonewall Democrats. And so we're really glad to have Jalen join us today. Jalen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
We were talking before we started that, we kind of planned out this Monday for the podcast because you are a teacher and this is your spring break. And I don't think it would have been possible for you to do it on any other Monday, or at least it would have been really tough for you to take 25 minutes off from your classes, I think, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, especially now that we're in the kind of hybrid virtual in-person, it would have been very, very difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I wanted to start talking about what was the biggest story in Texas over the past week, which was Governor Greg Abbott's announcement that he's basically lifting all COVID-19 restrictions. There had been a statewide mask mandate that had been in place for the past 8 months. There had been restrictions on business occupancy levels for basically a year, and he has lifted both of those and sort of left individuals to decide if they want to wear masks or not, and businesses have to kind of figure out what their policies are going to be, and businesses can now have 100% occupancy if they want to. I really wanted to get your thoughts, Jalen, on this announcement from the governor and what you think the impact of that's going to be.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like we can't have one crisis at a time. We have to add in now not that long ago, there were people storming the Capitol. There's still people who are feeling very much on edge. And I'm very concerned and worried about those businesses that do want to make sure that they're keeping their employees safe as well as their customers safe, and what that's going to mean when people start storming in and demanding that they don't have to wear a mask and saying, my governor said this. And I feel for everybody who's about to have to deal with that. As a teacher, I'm very concerned. Luckily, my district has, they've decided we're still going to have to wear masks in school, but I am worried about what about our parents who are going to be complaining and who are going to be upset and who are going to tell their kids, no matter what, don't take off your mask because, it's legal now. I'm very concerned by that and what the governor has just unleashed.
Jalen, like when you go around District 2, I mean, how much sentiment is there for just ending all mask requirements? Or are you finding that at all?
Oh, no, it seems very much everybody is still everyone is very fearful of COVID. And we recognize that on the east, west, and south sides, that's where a majority of the deaths related to COVID are happening and where a lot of these cases are taking place. And where, a lot of the people that we're speaking to, they're seniors. They want to be safe. They want to make sure everybody around them is staying safe because they're seeing what this looks like. Mm-hmm. And so there's not really that much interest in a society where we're not wearing masks in the middle of a pandemic, a deadly pandemic.
Right. Well, Governor Abbott's order, I mean, it effectively undercuts cities' ability to enforce mask rules. I mean, in your view, is there anything that City Hall can do about it to encourage mask wearing?
Yeah, I mean, really, that's all it can be at the moment is going to be that encouragement, that saying, hey, we're still responsible for keeping our people safe. We're still responsible for keeping our neighbors safe. We're going to continue wearing masks. We're going to lead by example. I think that's very much what can be done. I'm hoping that there's that. I hope that at some point there's incentivizing for businesses, but we're seeing a very reactionary city council and mayor. I hope that they're proactive on this, but
reactionary in what way?
So reactionary in the way that they wait for something traumatic and terrible to happen before and days after that to happen. They're not really. It doesn't feel as though they're saying, okay, they're going to wait until the 10th to say or do anything when this news has broken early on. That's kind of what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wonder that kind of that sort of reminds me. You brought up the fact of the virus has had a disproportionate impact on the east, west, and south sides. How do you feel Metro Health and the city have done enough to really boost some sort of have done enough to sort of protect people in those areas from the virus, or is this just purely the result of historic inequities?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's, we knew before there was a vaccine that these sides of towns and, these communities of colors and these marginalized communities, that they're most impacted, but a majority of the vaccinations are happening on the north side. It's also, we're tying we don't have a true wait list. We're requiring working families to be tied by a phone 24/7 in the hope of possibly getting a vaccine. And, whenever it pops up, it's like, we sign up at this link. It fills up in like 10 minutes.
Sure.
There's no way that's equitable I'm thinking about some of the seniors, some of the older women that I've spoken to recently who have been trying for weeks to get a vaccine. And
has it been clear to you, Jalen? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but have you got any sense of like what the justification has been for not having a wait list? Because there's so many people who have talked about how this would make the process work better. What's your sense about that?
Yeah, I've even heard council members speak about this. So I am not sure why this is not happening. I'm not sure. It feels like this is common sense at this point, and it's just nobody's acting on it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about obviously a huge story in the state, and this was a nationwide story recently, was what the state went through with we got another guest, I think.
Sorry, that's my dog.
No, that's okay. I mean, if your dog had a question, we can. That's cool. But Jalen, we went through the statewide issue with power outages, water outages about 3 weeks ago, and I think there were a lot of questions about this was obviously mandated by ERCOT, the operator of the statewide grid, but there were questions about how it was implemented locally and how people. We talked about inequities in the system, and I think there were concerns about how these rolling blackouts were distributed throughout the city and throughout the community. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not sure we could really call them rolling blackouts. I mean,
right.
At least not rotating in an equitable sense at all. Right. I think this is also an example where we should have been proactive. We knew that the cold was going to happen. And we know that climate change is, a threat to us. And yet we're not winterizing our infrastructure, knowing that we're going to see these instances of extreme heat, extreme cold. We should have had a comprehensive plan in place to protect our residents, especially those most vulnerable. We need to make sure that our residents with older homes have proper insulation and building upgrades that are going to keep them warm and safe when this happens. Again, because it's not a if, it's a when. And we should have had warming centers in place. And I'm thinking especially about the Grand Hyatt, which received a $13 million bailout and could have been used for an emergency shelter for our houseless community, many of which are LGBTQ plus and are members of other marginalized groups. And I'm thinking about, just because I don't know where to go with that, but it's disheartening. It's very disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jalen, I wonder, with obviously back in December, Councilman Trevino brought up the idea of using the Grand Hyatt as a warming center, and was sort of brushed off by the city manager. What do you make of sort of the city manager's role in this, and the role of city leadership?
I think so. I'll talk about Trevino first. I believe that he really, really, truly cares about people. And, I was somebody who was on Michael Montano's campaign when he was trying to unseat Trevino. And I believe that with Trevino, there's been a lot of growth on his end. And I feel more represented by him than my own council person, because he's showing up and he's trying. And I think the city council, the city manager and Ron Nirenberg, they're very upset at Trevino because he is very outspoken, and he is, in some senses doing the most. But if you want to get outraged and you want to spread your message, you don't do it in a whisper. Like, you can't do it in a whisper. So a lot of the things that we see as maybe a bit extra or as grandstanding are absolutely necessary. And these are the actions that get media attention, and it amplifies the work that's already being done. And I think it creates a headache for the city manager and the mayor. And that's why we're seeing some of this retaliatory kind of things going on.
Mm-hmm. One of the other big, stories about the San Antonio elections this year has to do with the ballot initiative from Fix SAPD, a group which is trying to reform policing in San Antonio, and their ballot measure calls for the repeal of collective bargaining for the police union. I think the mayor is kind of staying out of the fray on that one, and there've been even people who want police reform. Some have made the argument that collective bargaining is the way to do it. There have been disagreements about that. How do you see that?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things right now that I'm so upset that we're allowing the police union to do is they are trying to pretend like they are actually a union that has been a part of the labor movement. They've been able to, make it seem as though if they lose collective bargaining rights, everybody loses collective bargaining rights. Mm-hmm. And that is absolutely not the case. There's a reason that why until now, they haven't been active with the American Federation of Labor. They haven't been, a part of any of these movements. They've been very much a part of the oppressive class. And I'm absolutely supportive of increasing police accountability, including repealing 174 and eventually 143. And I want to make sure that it passes. I'm very much, I feel I'm a stakeholder in this, and my team will definitely be distributing literature and whatnot in these coming weeks.
So you'll be helping their campaign. Yeah, in the next few weeks.
Absolutely.
Well, you and I talked a few weeks ago about the fact that you did work as communications director in Jada Andrews Sullivan's city council office for about 5.5 months after she got elected in 2019. You were one of the people who helped get her elected. And I know that the experience of working for her was a really disillusioning one for you. Could you talk a little bit about what your expectations were for her when you joined her staff, and the areas in which you were disappointed by what you saw? Absolutely.
I think so. I believe I said this last time we spoke, is that I really believe that our government needs to be made up of working class people with stories, people who are going to feel the impacts of the decisions that they make on the dais. And when I was paying very close attention to that appointment process, she was one of the top 3 finalists, and I felt her story. I felt, she's a single mother, survivor of domestic violence. She was a veteran. She's started her own businesses. And she, in conversations with me, made it seem as though she was going to be very progressive. What's disappointed me is that I found along the way that is not the case, that she's not as progressive as she says that she was going to be. She's allowed herself to be manipulated by a chief of staff who does not have the best interests of the community.
We're talking about Lou Miller. We're talking about Lou Miller, right?
Yeah, we're talking about Lou Miller. It becomes clear when we were talking about that migrant detention center. She was gonna vote supportive of it, and me, Frankie, who was her her director of policy, we were like, no, please don't do this. We were trying to get top in the in the conversation, and she was not trying to hear it. We had to put our own press conference on and feed her what to say, and she still at that press conference speaking to the lawyer is like, I'm still with you. And that was one of the biggest wake up calls. But it's also, while I was in that office, Lou Miller is a very homophobic person, and he would make comments about the way that I dressed, the way that I looked, the way I acted. If I was line dancing with senior women at a senior center, he had a comment to say about it. And I came to Jada and I said, hey, this is happening. Here's this email. Here's detailed. Here's a list. I kept a list of what's going on. And she made it clear that it was Lou Miller, and, it was either him or everybody else. Everybody else was going to go. He was never going to leave that office. And he's paid very much so for that. But I think what that demonstrates is the need for an expanded non-discrimination ordinance. Because if someone like me in City Hall is being discriminated against, is openly I was telling other council members, I was telling city staff, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. And I would also be supportive of I'm going to work to establish a union for council aides, because they need to have the right to advocate for themselves, because, you see people who are being taken advantage of, and that's completely unacceptable at this point.
Going back to the non-discrimination ordinance, how would you put teeth in it?
Absolutely. I think so. One, it needs to apply to all businesses in the city, needs to apply to contract employees as well. And I believe that we have the capacity to implement fines and fees for those businesses that do not adhere to a non-discrimination policy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I want to mention too that when we talked about what your experiences in the District 2 office, I reached out to Lou Miller and the councilwoman, and they declined to talk about what had happened there, and said that they don't talk about personnel issues. So they've been given an opportunity to talk about it, but they've chosen not to do that up to this point.
Yeah, I think that's funny because I remember it was October of 2019. They did speak on personnel matters because at the time, Larita Gatlin McDavid had also filed a discrimination complaint. She's also a LGBTQ woman, and she filed. And then when she went to the media about it, Jada called her a disgruntled employee. And at this point, she has 5 disgruntled employees in the span of 2 years. How do you lose that much of a staff? And how do you have 11 people trying to challenge you? I think that speaks to who she is, the way that the community feels about her and the way that she is in the community.
Okay. So, real quick on the NDO, Jalen, have you been speaking to the chambers and business groups about this? Have you been sort of testing the waters on sort of the expansion of the NDO, and what kind of feedback have you gotten?
I have not. That's going to be a conversation that happens very soon. We're still, despite the fact that this has been moving on pretty fast, we are still in the early stages of, campaign season. And that's absolutely on my priority list. It's just been very hard with the pandemic and whatnot, and businesses are advocating for themselves at this moment for a number of other things. So we're going to definitely have that conversation, and I think it'll be fruitful.
I want to ask you a little bit about your background. I know that I think you were born in Tennessee, if I'm right, but you were part of a military family, so you've moved around quite a bit. If you talk a little bit about what that experience is like, because I know people I've known who've had that experience. I mean, it's a very unusual thing to kind of be the new person moving from place to place, and also just at what point did you become politicized? When did you start to develop a political consciousness?
Being a military brat, being someone who, the son of veterans, you have to grow very quickly, and you have to be very aware of who you are as a person. And you have to be able to establish yourself in a number of groups and a number of settings. And I think that's something that all the children of military parents can relate to in some sense. We're not supposed to talk about me being from Tennessee, me being born there. I know nothing.
Oh yeah. I didn't realize that was off limits.
No, it's okay. I don't know anything about Tennessee. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, so that's a few of the things that come with being a military brat. And I think growing up, I remember there were two very big things that happened when I was younger. One was when Obama was elected. I was living in Hawaii. I was half black, half white. I had seen Punahou Academy up close and in person. And it was just such an amazing experience to see that someone like me that had so many different parts of me I felt represented by in Barack Obama. And that was an amazing instance. And then also when I believe I had turned 17 years old. On my 17th birthday, Trayvon Martin was killed, and he had just turned 17 years old. Mm-hmm. And that was such a huge... That was sort of the start of what we're seeing. Not the start. It was, for me, the start of my place in this movement for Black lives. So I'd say those are two big things for me, two big influential moments. Gotcha.
Well, if you talked about your experiences and the homophobia that you felt that you experienced in the District 2 office, and if you get elected in District 2, you would be the first openly gay member of the council. What just in terms of the history, the potential history in that, what does that mean to you?
Oh my gosh, it means a lot, especially whenever we first started talking about a potential run for District 2, because people had reached out to me and they're like, hey, Jalen, you should run for this seat. There was always this conversation of, is District 2 ready for a gay man to represent them? Are they going to be open to you walking and knocking on their doors? And are they going to say, oh yeah, that's the guy that I want representing me? And there have been some great stories. And just the other day, one of my close friends who's walking with us, she was talking to an older man, and he was saying, this guy on this flyer, he likes boys, doesn't he? And she says, well, yes, he's married to a man. And he's like, I like his smile, and I like what he said on this flyer. So I will vote for him. And can I have a yard sign? And it shows that we're just in need of so much that District 2 will look past a number of things that maybe they wouldn't have in the past. And they're absolutely ready for an openly gay man to represent them. And the city is ready for that. We've been ready for a long time. And so to be a part of that history is amazing, but it's beyond so much more than me, because this has been in the making for a very long time.
As the city starts to work its way out of the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic impact of it, what special needs do you see economically for District 2, which, as you pointed out, has always, I think it's generally gotten the short end of the stick, in terms of services in the city, and has always had unique economic challenges. What do you look at as we sort of kind of work our way back to something close to economic normalcy?
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about the need for experts at City Hall. We need council members who are not going to push blame on the city manager and staff, and city staff needs to enact the will of the city council, who enacts the will of the community. What we want and need needs to be what happens. And as we talk about reopening and the economy, our priorities have been messed up. We're bailing out the Grand Hyatt while not too far down the street, our neighbors are homeless, looking for a place to sleep. People's homes are being struck down with code enforcement violations and having their power threatened to be shut off. And I believe we really need to start talking about direct relief that needs to be provided, both to, normal everyday people, but also to businesses, and to landlords who should be providing rent forgiveness. We need a number of these things to happen. And I think a lot of our elected officials are using this time to grandstand for political issues, and they want to prolong the conversation because they're not really being affected by it too much. And I think that's a huge disservice to our community. So I think those are a number of things that need to happen.
Gotcha. Where do you think some of the gaps might be in the city's response on sort of the economic side to the pandemic?
For sure. So I think we need to expand the efforts for, like I was saying earlier, the rent forgiveness. This is something that is happening where people can get rent forgiveness and landlords can get cash and tax incentives. We need to see this, expanded as well. I think I would really like to see our local officials advocate for a livable wage, advocate for, $15 or more an hour as a minimum. And we're trying to stay out of these big national issues when we are absolutely impacted by it at a local level. And I think we need to start seeing more of this happen.
And just to go back to programs to maybe help with rent and mortgage, is that something you'd be willing to dip into the city's reserve fund, its savings, to do?
Absolutely. If there's there's this like fear of going into that, that bucket, but if not now, when? If we are at our lowest point, it's absolutely necessary now.
Well, I think we're going to wrap things up at that point. Jalen McKee-Rodriguez, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the rest of your campaign. And it was really good talking to you. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me.
And those of you listening in, we'll be back again next Monday. And hope you're doing well. Thanks for listening.